Hi, I'm Nicole France, Vice President and Principal Analyst covering all things customer experience at Constellation Research.
And I'm Doug Henchman, also a Principal Analyst at Constellation Research on Data to Decisions. And welcome to episode 13 of Constellation Research TV. Now, as usual, we'll be talking about enterprise news and trends. But who's joining us on the show this week, Nicole?
Well, Doug, after our news summary, we will be introducing the latest addition to Constellation's research team, Andy Thurai. And then we will hear from colleague Diane Hinchcliffe on his newly published research about a digital experience maturity model. And finally, I know, Doug, you're going to be spending some time with one of our favorite experts on all things CIO, CTO, and Chief Digital Officer, Wayne Sadin. All about ransomware, right?
Right. Last week, we had our bi-monthly CXO chat with innovative CIOs, and everybody was talking about ransomware attacks and the related topic of cryptocurrencies and speculation about how and whether the FBI was actually able to recover some of those Bitcoins paid as ransom in one of those incidents. Nobody was more outspoken on that call than Wayne Sadin. He made the point that many of the victims of these ransomware attacks have been careless about their security. So I invited Wayne to share his advice on 6 security fundamentals that CXOs and company boards have to get behind. So it's not just on the Chief Security Officer. So stay tuned for that last segment of today's show.
It's going to be a good one. Wayne has been in the hot seat on this one himself, so he definitely knows what he's talking about.
But before we get to that, let's talk about the other news. Nicole, what caught your eye over the last couple of weeks?
Well, there's been a lot of stuff going on, Doug, and not least of them is regulation that applies very much to this broader industry space that we all call home. And probably one of the most intriguing and potentially high impact is draft legislation addressing, and I must say it's bipartisan legislation, addressing antitrust laws that are squarely focused on some of our biggest technology companies, so the likes of Google, Facebook, Apple. And it's quite fascinating because although we still have quite a few hurdles to get through if anything were to actually be passed, there are a couple of different approaches that we see in this legislation. One is perhaps the most obvious, which is breaking up these companies, so separating their platform businesses from the other operations they have that benefit from operating on those platforms. And the other is basically saying that platform companies can't advantage their other businesses running on the platform. So, one of my big questions is always in any sort of legislation, how easy is it to identify and enforce? And I gotta say, although it's certainly more brutal to go the company breakup route, that's clearly gonna be a lot more straightforward than trying to regulate and determine where the line is about advantaging or unfairly advantaging a business where you also run the platform.
Yeah, I guess I'm skeptical that anything can happen bipartisan way on Capitol Hill these days. If we see Facebook and Google perhaps getting a higher bar for some of their M&A activity, having to prove that it's not anti-competitive, Amazon a little bit more scrutiny when selling their own branded products, Apple maybe a harder time entering new businesses that are already on the App Store. I know I personally have had a lot of problems with subscriptions to Apple, to apps originally subscribed to through the App Store, and then I want to convert to a discounted annual subscription. And the example I had was iFit. I had to actually discontinue the subscription, and then you think you're going to lose all your content before I could resubscribe with that app provider. So that's clearly something I think lawmakers and more are going to be taking a look at.
Yeah, not a great customer experience, is it? For sure.
No, and this issue with these large digital companies is also in the news last week. The Apples, Googles, Microsofts, and those companies managing our email accounts have been seeing a flood of law enforcement requests for their data. And the specific news on Friday, it was revealed that the Trump administration had used this approach of law enforcement requests for information, and it turned out it was very targeted against their political rivals. But regardless of which party is in control, the problem is really the abuse of this power. Vague subpoenas, overly broad requests. Firms have to comply with these law enforcement requests, but they're not likely to challenge unless it's a client. For example, in the first 6 months of 2020, Apple says it challenged 238 demands for data from law enforcement, but that was only 4% of the requests that they saw. So this seems to me like a targeted sort of piecemeal approach to the kind of eavesdropping the NSA was doing that was revealed a decade ago by Edward Snowden. It's a slippery slope. You know, the question is, do you trust government? Who in government do you trust? Really open some very sensitive questions about government use of our data.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because that segues nicely to one of the other big headlines of this thing I think it's worth us touching on, which is a new executive order from the Biden administration around TikTok. So essentially rescinding the Trump order, and clearly there's not really going to be any deal done. I think many of us were anticipating that was likely going to be the outcome of all of this brouhaha anyway. But what it is prompting is a broader review into foreign-owned application companies and what happens with that data. So, you know, if we were to really get down to brass tacks here, I think what we all want to see is a regulatory environment where there's a high degree of consistency, there's a high degree of transparency, and we all understand what the core objective is. So maintaining our privacy, giving us as individuals the ability to understand and control what happens with our data, at least to a significant degree, and to also understand, hopefully, what some of the big risks and implications of letting that data go really are. So it'll be interesting to see what the outcome of this new executive order proves to be.
Yeah, so that executive order seemed to be, let's do something broader than just TikTok and look at all foreign-owned. But I think you're right. The observation we would make based on the other stories this week is that we should also be looking at our own domestic technology suppliers coming up with consistent standards that are applied regardless of the domicile of the tech company in question. My final topic this week, I'll be quick, we don't have much time, data fabrics. It's been a really hot topic this spring. Google Dataplex, IBM Smart SQL, these are sort of the poster child announcements. Seems like these fabrics are going broader than just data access. It extends to metadata management and governance. And in that vein, I'd also add Microsoft Azure Purview to that mix. But most of these offerings, big headlines, but they're still beta. So we'll see what actually comes of these new fabric type offerings.
It will be interesting to see because, as you know, data, particularly customer data, is a big hot button issue for me. And it's, I think, a very big priority topic for a whole lot of businesses because it has such a significant impact on the way they operate. And also, it's probably one of the biggest headaches, whether you're talking about using that data effectively in any part of the business or the IT organization's ability to manage it and govern it effectively. So all this data fabric development is going to have a lot of big implications that hopefully help to tackle, at a minimum, that kind of agglomeration and management of data in a way that makes it easier.
A big cost challenge as well, so very important.
Absolutely. So more to come on this one. Well, I guess that's a wrap on our news summary. And now, Doug, I know you have the treat of being the one to introduce everyone to our latest new colleague and analyst colleague, I should say, here at Constellation. So take it away.
Hi, this is Doug Henshin, Principal Analyst at Constellation Research, and it's my pleasure to introduce Constellation's newest analyst, Andy Thurai. That's T-H-U-R, ends with A-I. Welcome, Andy. And I guess the first thing that people will want to know is, what will you be covering?
Excellent question. Thanks, Doug. I appreciate the introduction and happy to be here. And as you astutely pointed out, I am Torres with an AI. so not by virtue of that, but my background in areas that I'll be covering here would be anything AI and ML related, whether it's platforms or apps related or optimization and data pipelines or data optimization and all that. So having said that, the specific areas I'll be looking for to cover would be things like AI ops, observability, ML ops, data ops. When I say data ops, particularly as it relates to things like model ops and those kind of things. In other words, how do you create the models and move them along the line? How do you mature the models? How do you update the model? How do you move them to the edge? And some of the cloud topics too. And as with most of the analysts here, we have a broad spectrum. Some of our areas, obviously yours and mine as well, overlaps a little bit. But I'm working on the what we call as a short list of the things that I'm going to be covering. But those are my areas of expertise that I'll be looking for to work on.
Well, I've been here 6 years, and there's more than enough to cover. My area is data decisions, and I've long felt that I couldn't get to everything under the sun of data. So, welcome to have you here. You've spent a long time in the vendor camp.
Yep.
Why become an analyst?
Good question. So a couple of reasons. One is, even though I was on a vendor side, most of my work was customer facing, whether it's started off as an SE or a field architect. And then the last few roles I held were either sort of a strategist, thought leadership / field CTO kind of roles. In other words, telling the customer how and what they need to do, right? So over the course of years, when I have been advising customers, I've heard customers tell me that hey, you starting to sound more and more like an analyst, right? You're morphing into that one. And then there are even times that customers have commented saying that hey, so this obviously being in a vendor side, you can't charge for. It's not a consulting service. It's more of a free advice we give to the customers in the hope that they would buy your software and service. So they were saying, hey, I paid XYZ analysts to get the similar advice, but yours is far better, but better I get it for free. I'm like, well, it's not free if you buy our software, but you have to buy our software, right? That's the end goal. So that's one that prompted me to start thinking that, I'm kind of doing an analyst role to begin with anyways, right? So that's one. And two, which is, you'll love this, an interesting story is that I've always, all my life, loved and enjoyed critiquing others, whether it's when you're watching a movie, critiquing how badly the movie was done or how good it was done, or watch your kids play sports, rather than encouraging them. My wife has complained at times saying that you're critiquing them more than you're encouraging them, right? But it's like, yeah, to make them better, so that kind of, it looks like all my life I've enjoyed critiquing. And the third element of that is that, like I said, I was doing not only advising the customers, but if you look at the last few years, I've written 100, maybe 200 articles on thought leadership on emerging tech areas, right? Varying from AI to ML to cloud to, edge related topics and whatnot. So in other words, how do you make any of the emerging technologies into enterprise grade is my specialty. So combining all those things, when the chance came about, when Ray was suggesting we have a role, and then we got engaged in a conversation. Here I am.
Well, great. We don't have a lot of time, so maybe just jump to where you're starting. What do you think you're going to be doing some of your first research projects on?
Sure. So the very first one, I was looking at a few options. One is the AI ops, which is pretty hot field, and then there's a lot of pent up demand, and I'm obviously getting briefing and talking with almost every vendor in that space. And then observability. But then there's one particular niche area which I think is very underserved. Almost no analyst that I know of is covering in deep detail. It's more of the incident management, incident triaging, and incident notification areas. I don't know what the title is going to be yet, but the combination of that areas, not the AIOps in itself is an area that I want to cover. I will be covering the soon near future rather. So is observability, but this particular niche area is a report I'm thinking of doing first. I'm working on the short list now, and I'm already taking vendor briefings. So that would be probably my first report.
Well, that's great. Finally, Andy, you mentioned the site where you've written a lot of articles. I believe it's the Field CTO site. But how can people get in touch with you? How can people see the kinds of things you've already put out there, your blog, et cetera?
Yeah, so my personal website, in addition to be putting stuff on Constellation's site that I've maintained for a number of years, is called thefieldcto.com. That's thefieldcto.com. That's one option. And obviously, I welcome viewers to follow me on Twitter. I want to become as popular as you are, Ray is. That's at Andy Thorai, or connect with me or send a note on LinkedIn as well. Would be happy to respond to any of that. Would love to connect and stay in touch.
Well, that's great. So glad you're joining us, Andy. And watch for Andy on future episodes of CRTV. And looking forward to years of working together. Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, Doug. Looking forward to it.
Hello, this is Diane Hinchcliffe, VP and Principal Analyst at Constellation Research. And in my latest report, I look at the topic of digital experience monitoring, which looks at how do we make sure that our digital experiences to our workers and to our customers and other stakeholders is performant and delivering wherever they happen to be located, all the way to the last mile, ensuring that you see the types of performance characteristics that you'd want to have. And so traditional digital experience monitoring has looked at things like latency, errors, the network traffic, saturation, and so on. And that's at the base level of the maturity curve. What we're seeing now is that organizations that are particularly successful and being very strategic around digital experience monitoring are looking at business outcomes like conversion rate or customer satisfaction, adoption rate of their products. They're really tying the performance of digital experience to specific results that they would like to see in their business. And so we worked with digital experience monitoring organizations like Catchpoint, and we developed by categorizing their customers and the level of strategic capabilities that they were bringing to their business. We developed a 5-step maturity curve where level 1 is really not doing anything. It's kind of non-deterministic. You don't really know how your digital experiences are performing out in the field. To relatively passive level 2, which is you're collecting some data, but it's not really driving significant changes to the way that you develop the product or deliver the experience. And we see that the most advanced organizations get all the way to the top, which is value-led. They're really tying directly the measures of their business performance with how the quality of their digital experience and how effective it is in realizing the specific goals that they have for that digital experience. And along the way, in the research, we also identify, well, what sort of technology stack do you have to have? Going from your basic monitoring core to more advanced capabilities to what do you need to get all the way up to a value-led capability with digital experience. And this will really help organizations in their efforts in trying to climb that maturity curve. We also see that DEM maturity is driven by different business functions, where when it's not really driven by anything, it doesn't affect much of the organization except operations, perhaps. But as you get more strategic, it affects product development. It affects how the business is run, and so on. So you can pick up the report on the Constellation site. I encourage you to get a copy. Thanks.
Solar Winds, Colonial Pipelines, JBS Foods, Oldsmore Water, the Irish Health Service, and the list goes on. All examples of organizations hit by ransomware in 2021 alone. So how do you keep your company's name off this list? I'm here with innovative CIO, CTO, and Chief Digital Officer Wayne Sadin to talk about how to protect your company. This is Doug Hench of Constellation Research, and I'm glad to be talking to Wayne because he's seen it all. Today, he's a consultant and advisor to CEOs and boards, He's Chief Digital and Information Officer at Via Group Partners, a fast-growing human capital and strategy consulting firm. He has had CXO and board advisory roles in energy, logistics, healthcare, software, financial services. Welcome, Wayne, and thanks for joining us.
Hey, Doug, it's good to be here and good to be talking about such a timely topic.
Yeah, we had Constellation had its bi-monthly CXO talk today. You were very vociferous on it. Lots, definitely all this ransomware is the topic du jour for CIOs. From what you've seen with all these examples, are we really seeing a new level of sophistication from hackers, or are a lot of these victims, have they been careless and failed to do the fundamentals of security work that they need to do?
I think most of security involves missing the fundamentals. I tell my clients this: if the North Koreans or the Chinese want to take you down, you're probably going down. The challenge for most of us, if you're not in the defense business, you're not a government agency, is to deal with all the script kiddies and average hackers that bought a hack of the month kit and are essentially running down the list of apartment doors, kind of trying the knobs and seeing which one is easy to get into.
So you wrote a blog, I think, about some of the 6 important things that companies should address. Can you share that with us?
Sure, happy to do it. Now remember, I am doing this to make it easy for the C-suite and for the board of directors to understand that this is not jargon that you can't get. A lot of what I do is translate tech to business and business to tech. And yet what got me angry and made me write this stuff is that I saw people saying to the boards, well, you need these multi-hour presentations and we need millions of dollars of consultants to explain what you need to do. It's real simple. At the board level, for the average company, focus on 6 things. The first one is robust prevention. Let's make it harder for them to get in. Let's not lose track of our firewalls. Let's do our basics, and we'll cover that in a minute. But make it hard for people to get in. Don't let the average hacker get in. You know the old story about the two people and the bear. One says, I got to put my sneakers on because the bear's chasing him. You're never going to outrun a bear. I just got to outrun you was the answer. The average hacker is just looking for somebody who's left their door ajar. So that's the first one, robust prevention. The other one is quick detection. Once they're in, and assume somebody might get in. The trick is not letting them stay in very long. Dwell time, the time that an evildoer spends in your system before you detect them, has been reported widely as 100 days, 150 days, as much as a year and a half.
Wow. Anything
they want to do in your company, if they've got a year and a half to play with the internals of your computers, they're probably going to wreak a lot of havoc. The third thing is defense in depth. That is, don't let them, once they're in, go from place to place to place. It's as though you lock the outside doors of your bank or your jewel depository, but left all the inside doors open. Make it harder for them to get, let's say in the case of Target, from your system that paid your air conditioning contractor over to the system that swiped your credit cards.
Yeah, the flat
Think of the
network
defense in depth. Yeah, and again, I try to stay away from techie terms when we're talking to the board. Yeah, flat network, we can talk a lot of jargon, but essentially it's that you don't want to have the moat around the castle, and then inside the castle, everything is behind a screen door.
Yeah.
So just think about it that way. Then keep your secrets secret, and that means encrypt. Remember, when people steal your data in a ransomware attack, there are 2 threats. One is we're going to keep it and not give it back to you. You can fix that with backups. The other one is we're going to leak it to people. We're going to share your trade secrets. We're going to share your employee payroll. We're going to share passwords. Well, encrypt the stuff. If it's all encrypted, yes, they can still re-encrypt it and keep you out if you're not careful, but they can't sell it, they can't reuse it, and they can't steal it. So encrypt your stuff for many reasons, but one of them is make it hard for the hacker to then ransom it twice. The next thing is prepare to repel boarders. Assuming you are hacked, and you're going to be, and you found it, and you will, what do? This is the place where you get an expert. This is the place where most companies probably don't have all the forensic tools and all the experts. So go figure out who you're going to work with and have them ready to help you repel the boarders. And the last thing I'll say is don't keep all your eggs in one basket. If you have your data in one place, make sure you have a backup or multiple backups, and make sure maybe one of them is to tape and one of them is to internet and one of them is to hard drive, so that if stuff is actually damaged, you've got older copies that you can recover from. 6 simple things at the executive level that you can do.
And that last point came up today in our CXO talk, and it was, and test your backups to make sure your backups actually work. So many companies avoid that simple but really crucial step.
And that really good. Sorry, Doug. Yeah, that goes under the heading of hygiene. We'll talk about that in a moment. A lot of what we talk about in security and integrity, and that's not just ransomware, that's not even just cybersecurity, that's just keeping the place running. It comes down to hygiene. Make sure that the doors are locked. Make sure that you do your backups. Make sure, as Doug says, when you do I had a client once that was doing the backups faithfully for years, 10 years, they told me. And they all worked fine. And they got a report that said backup succeeded. And then one day they needed to restore a backup. And guess what? 10 years worth of corrupted backups were faithfully recorded. So test the backup and test the restore. If you don't know that something works in a crisis, you really don't have anything. There's a saying, the worst time to acquire a new skill is in the middle of a gunfight. It's a military thing. If you're in the middle of an attack, don't try to figure out how your restore works and how your disaster recovery works. Test it.
Right. So great summation of really all the important disciplines, and you started to get into some, concrete steps to take, and a short list of things that you should check right away. We talked about backup. What are some of the other important must-dos?
So focus on kind of 6.5 things, and you'll see why I say that in a minute. Manage systemic risk, not just ransomware, not just cyber, as I alluded to. You've got the systemic risk of all the pieces of your company. You've got to be looking at physical security. A lot of times physical security sits over here and info over there. Well, you can have the best cybersecurity in the world. If someone can unlock the door to the server room and walk out with your firewall, you really don't have a secure environment. So think holistically, think systemic. And if you're a board, don't have 5 committees all dealing with aspects of risk. Put them all in a room, figure out your systemic risk and manage that rather than individual pieces, because you'll trip over one to protect the other. That's first. Second is technical debt. Anybody that's ever heard me talk knows that I'm a nutcase about technical debt. That's because I've been doing this for 40 years. And a lot of the systems I'm dealing with today are older than me. They were put in decades ago. And so technical debt is very simple. It's the sum total of all the stuff you should have fixed and upgraded and repaired over the years and didn't do.
Or retired.
It's the stuff that, or retire. Yeah, one of the things too is replace it. Absolutely. I had a CEO say to me once, but my Windows XP machine boots and I can send emails. Why is that a risk? We're actually sitting by an airport. We looked out the window. There was a P-51 Mustang, a World War II fighter plane landing. And I said, look, the fighter plane from World War II still takes off and lands. It's terrific. Now let's put it up against the 5th generation fighter, a Russian Su-57, Chinese, what do they call it, Mighty Dragon, and tell me that World War II fighter plane is going to win the dogfight. The hackers are flying 5th generation fighters. You don't want to be in a World War II fighter plane to defend yourself.
Right.
Stop thinking of a perimeter. The old way of thinking about IT was we had this thing called a data center, a building in the middle. We built a big building, we filled it up with mainframes, and then everything pointed in. And we had a thing called a perimeter. Everything outside the company was bad. Everything inside the company is good.
Not
today, we don't have.
Yeah.
Today, the center of our IT universe is this thing, this phone, or this tractor, or this truck, or this spaceship. And so you're connected to hundreds, thousands of endpoints. So stop thinking of inside and outside, good and bad. Go back to World War II. I guess I'm on a World War II kick today. The Maginot Line that was built in France to defend themselves was very strong until somebody just went around it with mechanized infantry. So don't think of yourself as in and out. Think of yourself as defending in depth, as I said before. Also, 2 words. If I'm going to use a technical term for a board, 2 words. 0, trust. Those are the two most important words in cybersecurity. What zero trust says is don't just say this is here and this is here and you can't get in, but it's why are you here? If somebody comes into your house to fix the air conditioner, should they be inside your safe or looking in your filing cabinet? No. That's the principle of zero trust. I might let you in, but I've only let you into this room and only let you in to touch the air conditioner, not the gold bullion room. So we think about how to protect ourselves. It's not trivial, but it is doable and gets away from the notion of you're either in or out, locked or unlocked. It gets to the notion of granularity. Why are you here and what are you doing? Look at SolarWinds. I've got a network monitoring tool. It has access to everything. But why would SolarWinds monitoring my network ever be reading data files and sending my general ledger data out to another server somewhere on the internet? Why would that ever be right? So let's build a zero trust environment and think about why are systems and people doing what they're doing and should they be doing that?
That's great.
The next thing is hygiene.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead with hygiene.
Yeah. So hygiene we talked about. It's just do the day-to-day stuff. Patch your systems. Change your passwords. When people leave, get rid of them in the system. All the basics. Again, Sony, when they took their security back over, didn't inventory all of their firewalls and network access points. So they just weren't watching some of them, and they got hacked potentially through those holes. So hygiene is super important, relatively simple. It just requires you to grind out the work. Don't skimp on hygiene. The next one is hyperscale cloud. We could spend hours on that, but if you have a really cruddy old infrastructure, look at hyperscale cloud. Even if you have a pretty good infrastructure, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, the others are spending billions of dollars on security, on process, on automation. So if you move to their environment and you move well, you can benefit from a lot of what they've done. And the reason I said, by the way, there are 6.5 things is that's number 6. But the half thing is don't outsource your brains. Don't say, well, I'm in the cloud, so therefore I'm fine. There's a bank that had a big security budget and had a lot of stuff sitting in AWS and Amazon, and they got hacked. And they said, well, Amazon should have protected us. The person came in through a well-known interface in Amazon that was well documented. And when you've got a huge security budget, don't blame them. Well, Amazon didn't take care of me right. Don't outsource your brains. Pay attention, even if you've got someone else managing a part of your operation. And the last thing is add a qualified technology expert to your board. Put somebody on your board that understands tech. 20 years ago with Sarbanes-Oxley, we added a qualified financial expert. That was mandated by the government. They said, we don't know how to read financial statements on board, so let's make sure at least one person can. Fast forward to 2021. Let's have one person on the board that understands this stuff well enough to guide the rest of the board and understand management's questions and answers.
Yeah, a very important point to end on. That's unfortunately all the time we have, but thanks so much for your insights, Wayne, and we hope CXOs will listen and heed your advice.
I'll say it again, the CXOs need to listen, but more important, tone at the top. The board members, the C-suites need to be focused on it, and so they are sympathetic to the CISOs and CIOs when we come asking.
Another great point. Thank you, Wayne.
My pleasure.
Well, that's a wrap on Constellation Research TV, episode 13. Get set for episode 14 coming up in 2 weeks on Wednesday, June 30 at 9 a.m. Pacific time.
I'm glad we got to do lucky episode 13 together, Doug. But next time, that's right, it's going to be our favorite co-hosts, Liz Miller and Holger Mueller, on the 30th of June. And in the meantime, you can always follow us on Twitter at ConstellationR and on LinkedIn, and also follow the hashtag CRTV. Well, that's all for now. Thanks for watching and have a great week. Is this proof, Doug, that analysts do actually put some preparation and thought into what they say before they say it? Maybe not. Maybe this is a counterfactual. Okay.
Is this boilerplate?
Yeah, it is. It is. No, I'm making sure I get past the boilerplate. That's what I'm doing.
Oh, I got you.
Okay. Hi, I'm Nicole France, Vice President and Principal Analyst at Constellation Research, covering all things customer experience.
And I'm Doug Henson, Principal Analyst at Constellation Research, covering data decisions. Sorry
Yeah,
about
here
that.
we go. Take two.
Data decisions.
I know. It's a beep, boop, ba, boop, ba, boop, beep, like the beep, 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 ba, 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 boop. Okay, here we go. Hi, I'm Nicole France, Vice President and Principal Analyst covering all things customer experience at Constellation Research.
And I'm Doug Henson, also Principal Analyst at Constellation Research, covering data decisions.
It's not Friday, Doug. It's only Monday.
Wow. Data to decisions. Data to decisions. Data to decisions.
Maybe you need a little, like, you can, like, some sign language to spell
I'm
it
just
out.
trying to give Bryce some material to work with.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. All right. Ready?
Yep.
Hi, I'm Nicole France, Vice President and Principal Analyst at Constellation Research. Covering all things. No. Doug, aren't you going to miss this?
I don't know what's up. I think I just had too much coffee this morning.
No nitrous? Are you sure? Sure?
All right.
Okay.
Bite my tongue. Sorry.
You're going to make me laugh now. All right.
All right.
Were you serious about getting on SNL? This is not the way to do it.
No,
Yeah.
I'll have to watch the,
I just hit record, so outtakes for Ray, if the earlier the better.
I don't have any good props for outtakes, because I have some Surface and like whiteboard cleaning, cleaning stuff. So I just found this in my office. I don't know if that's exciting at all. Yeah.
Nicole is not like, like usually when people gather their boxes, things, hey, do you want this? You can't do that.
No, I can't. Well, the other thing is that here in Big Bear, I haven't really done much to my office yet.
Yeah.
I mean, I look like I'm in a hostage video most of the time. So, yeah, I can't. I haven't even put it together to give it away yet, Doug. That's the thing.
I would like to ask the Symbionese Liberation Army to release me from.
All of these views and opinions are my own, I swear. This confession has not been coerced.
Woohoo! Good job.
Right.
Oh,
Hey, look at that. 25
Last
minutes.
episode with Nicole.
I know.
Sad.
I know. I'm gonna miss you guys. I'm gonna have to, Doug. I'm just gonna have to do like moonlighting appearances on CRTV.
well, there you
Yes. I'm probably gonna hear one before you take off.
go. You're gonna-